Hi, Scott Orlin with CINEMA-Magazine. Okay, all you Marvel fans, one of your favorite is now being reinvented as a TV series, WandaVision. And I'm here with Wanda herself, Elizabeth Olsen. Elizabeth, obviously in the Avenger scenarios, your character had a certain type of trajectory, a certain path that she was following. Now that it's being reinvented for television, all bets are off. It's a
hmm
lot different. How surprised were you when you got the first scripts or the pitch about what was going to happen?
Well, it was more Kevin's pitch to me when we didn't have a creator on board yet. He had just come up with this concept, and it was right before they were going to announce Disney Plus taking on Marvel shows, and he well, they first had to ask for permission, but it was it was such an original idea, and because I know why we're using sitcom to tell this story, it was always a part of the pitch, the reason. And so I just loved it. And it connects back to the comic books that I love of Wanda and Vision in suburbia with their kids, or Vision in the suburbs, just trying to be a normal robot. And so there's these funny things within the comics themselves that we're pulling inspiration from. But then we're also telling a very deep human story post Endgame, and it's so fun to play with the perspective that the audience takes.
You mentioned sitcom, and when I first started watching this, and I knew nothing about the story, and I'm like, wow, that opening looks reminds me of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And then
Yeah.
it gets to episode two, and I went, wait, now that kitchen, that's the Bewitched kitchen. And then it gets to the third episode, and you're like, okay, now we're in the Brady Bunch. So
Yeah.
obviously, each episode is going to kind of take on an homage to a different type of sitcom. What do you think that lends to the story? And does the audience miss out if they haven't had a history with that original sitcom?
I think what it lends to this story are these comforting, even if you don't know. I think it would be hard to find someone who doesn't have a connection to a sitcom in any decade, I feel like. But maybe they are out there, and especially ones that don't know the older sitcoms. There is this universal comfort of a sitcom, of creating this kind of unattainable, idealistic family, or the family sitcom, the family nucleus. And the trope of trying to fit in and not being and not not wanting to know how different you are and fitting into this new neighborhood, I think is a very familiar trope in a lot of sitcoms. And then this other idea that I think the show really benefits from is every episode there's something to resolve that is blown way out of proportion, but there's like this small thing that needs to be resolved, and we watch them freak out trying to resolve it, and then we watch the resolution. And those kind of small moments in life are the things that remind us of all the things that we blow out of proportion in our own lives. But for superheroes to be obsessing over these very small moments is like an additional element to the mystery, the comedy, and the why are we in a sitcom?
You
What's
mentioned
so enjoyable about these moments?
you mentioned mystery, and it's kind of fascinating too because historically with a sitcom, there is that resolution after the end of the 30 minutes. And this, I don't want to give anything too much away to the audience, but the end of each episode, you're like, what? It takes you further down the rabbit hole. So talk a little bit about the mystery setup of the show, because as an audience watching, you're constantly having to try and unwrap because you don't know what really is going on.
Yeah, so these characters only know as much as the audience does, and until everyone discovers things together, I guess. But these moments of tension, I think, are really when the Marvel Cinematic Universe is starting to kind of knock at the door of the American sitcom, or trying to let itself in. And these moments of tension of perceived what is the perceived reality, is what we keep hinting towards. And it all does, I mean, episode the first three episodes kind of feel like they exist as a group, and then everything changes in a way, but it doesn't change, but it changes. And there's always cliffhangers. There's always more information, and there is a larger mystery and complication at play. And it's just a ride you have to kind of allow yourself to go on. And, the patience of the week to week episode and cliffhangers is something that Marvel doesn't usually do, or Marvel fans don't usually sit through.
As an actor, all the work that you've done prior in film or in television, there's been a consistency with character in the sense that usually you have a hairstyle, usually you have a costume, and it's fairly consistent through the evolution of the arc of that character. Mm-hmm. With this, every episode, you're morphing. You look totally different. How interesting is that for you as an actor?
It was so fun. I mean, it's always fun to play parts that feel very different from, your physical appearance, or the genre is specific, the tone in which we tell our story. And then the era is specific. And so it's like getting to exercise all of these skills that like sometimes they don't get really utilized that often as an actor. And so it was like fine tuning almost. It kind of felt like the response your body has as an actor when you do a play, because you remember that you have a full body that has to move through space. And people can see your legs and your posture and how you walk. And so all of those things just felt so important every single decade to make a clear evolution and homage to these sitcoms. And it was just a blast and a challenge. And kind of, Matt used the word schizophrenic feeling, and it kind of was, especially because we had to work so quickly all the time. It felt like we did not have enough time to finish the show. And it was a massive undertaking, but it was a blast.
You mentioned before the word neighborhood, and obviously part of the humor of this is that these people move into a new neighborhood. There's neighbors, there's the community that they kind of have to adapt to or try to immerse themselves in. As someone, because of the nature of your work, you have to move around a lot. What's the most interesting experience you've ever had moving into a new neighborhood?
That's such a lovely question. I think God, I love neighborhoods. It's so funny because I love this job because I love living in places as opposed to visiting. Like I loved living in Shreveport, Louisiana. I just felt so comfortable there. And I think, I don't know, my neighborhood story would be that I live on this little cul-de-sac, and the neighbor directly next to me, I don't know if I shared this the other day, but she is a mother-in-law to my seventh grade English teacher, and her grandkids go to the same school that I grew up going to. And it's like all of a sudden, I became an adult and I left home. I went to New York and I came back to LA, and I moved next door to like my entire, childhood. And it was just like this strange thing that this neighborhood I can't escape, even though I want to, have all these new experiences. I keep coming back to the same feeling.
And my last question for you, I want to talk to you about exercise. And
yes.
The exercise, the muscle group that I'm talking about is your humor muscle. Because yes. Obviously we've seen you in so many different things, and Paul as well. And the two of you are so funny in this, just the naturalness between the two of you. Talk about that dynamic of working with Paul and setting up, because to get that tone, it has to work just right.
Yeah. Yes. It was so intimidating to think about doing the first show in front of a live audience and like wanting them to laugh, and us, being not fools, but funny, and not doing a satire, but a sincere homage to Dick Van Dyke Show. It's like a speed. It's a speed. It's your homework. It's your diction. It's your voice. but everything was, I felt like everything was at an 11 the whole time. Like we were just like motorboating through all of this dialogue and all of this physical comedy. And luckily, Paul and I started to feel like we were in such a rhythm with one another that we started doing double takes to each other when we weren't really planning on it, or we would come up with gags that we thought that made each other laugh. And that was kind of our barometer. And yeah, it was, thank God we had Catherine Hahn, who's comedy gold. So she, you know, her just being there is funny. She's just funny. And so and then we had the help of, you know, we had a great ensemble that really was game. And I think we all existed in the same world. And that is because Matt Shackman really brought us all together before we started filming for 2 weeks. And we worked through the same references. We read through the scripts and we became a company. And he did a great job leading us through this journey so that we all lived in the same world.
Well, I just have to thank you for making me an addict, because I need more. I need another fix of this show. I've only seen 3 episodes. Elizabeth Olsen, such a pleasure. The show is called WandaVision, and this is Scott. Till next time.
Thank you, Scott.